Bert, 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 Bert! Yeah! Ron Babe was right. Ron Babe was right.
I'm feeling spry. Hey everybody, it's Ron Bain with the Hunting Dog Podcast. It is November the 7th, a Sunday. I'm sitting in the kennel. I'm actually getting a belated birthday dinner. My daughters and family are coming over. Sue made a couple of my favorite dishes and my favorite dessert. So it's kind of like another birthday episode, kind of, in a little bit. Well, here's where it's going to go. Last week, I did, I told you I don't do these normally. I don't sit there and just yammer on, but something came up that made me want to do something similar that I did last week. And one of them was the fact that, on any given episode that I do, I'll receive an email or two or three. And it's always somebody's like, oh, that was great, Ron. I'm glad you finally talked about this kind of dog or this kind of hunt. And, of course, I understand if something's near and dear to someone's, main topic or main passion or breed, they'll write me something. And that's not uncommon, but I got a inordinate, what's that word I'm looking for? How about unusual? I got an unusual amount of responses through anything from Instagram to Facebook to emails to direct text messages to people who, that I converse with or have my phone number. And a lot of people talked about their favorite trip or that really resonated with them. And then at the same time, if you back this up about, maybe a month ago or so, one of my patrons, Nick Hebner, I think I don't pronounce both E's. Anyway, Nick, thank you for this. Nick wrote me, as many people have when they've lost a dog. I get this email once a month sometimes. Ron, what was that George Bird Evans quote that you read sometimes every once in a while? And it's usually when one of my dog passes, and I cry while I'm reading it. And not crying like sobbing, but it's a tough one to get through, right? Most of you know it. I'm going to read it so you hear it. I have not had a recent loss of a dog, so I think I can get through it without any tremor in my voice. But anyway, Nick, I don't know if it was Nick personally or a friend of his lost a dog, or if he went somewhere. I think he went somewhere and maybe saw this and wanted to do it for his dog. So what it is he had this George Bird Evans quote out of one of his books put onto a very large plaque engraved in like a plate. And at the bottom of this walnut plaque is room for a lot of little ID tags, whether it's from the collar or you had them made up of the dogs that have been in your life, or possibly the friends and the dogs that have been in your life. I don't know if Nick saw this or if Nick came up with it, but just yesterday, a package came in the mail, and it was the plaque. Nick was kind enough. I said, let me know. I think I'd like that idea. I'd like to make a plaque like that. I'm getting up there in years, and I've got quite a few dogs that I could put up there and put their names on there, And it's just one of them things. I like memorials. I've never been afraid of funerals. I've never been afraid of death. I've always kind of embraced it in some weird, strange way. And I would only save that for another podcast in 10 years from now, maybe my last podcast, or in 20 years from now. I can explain that to you in better terms. But point being, I got this plaque yesterday, and my wife said, oh, well, you're going to have to get some tags for it. And I said, yeah, where am I going to get tags? And I'll probably have to go to a trophy shop or something like that and have. And she goes, well, how many dogs are there? I'm like, I don't know. I might fill this. There's a lot of room on this thing. And I thought, well, I've had a lot of dogs that should go on this plaque, So for those of you who, I'll get to that in just a minute. This is going to be just a little different. I'm going to always thank my Patreon patrons. We had another great Zoom room last Thursday. And, it got to be about 3.5 hours. I think there was 12 of us left. And I had a little, I had a rough morning, but it's a lot of fun. It's like all of us going out to a campfire and just shooting the shit. And a lot of people just come on and listen, and a dozen or so people throw in their 2 cents or tell us a hunting story or share a waypoint or share a little gun. Like last week, we started talking about how to fly ammunition and guns, and it turns out only a couple of us had. And there's a lot of, the conversations go everywhere. So my thanks to my Patreon patrons, first and foremost, my title sponsor, Pike Gear, technical clothing for the upland hunter, Onyx, know where you stand, know where you've been, set a pin, CZ USA, where price meets quality in every shotgun, Boss shot shells. Oh, I got a nice post coming up with Boss shot shells. I'll tell you that later. Show the birds who's boss. This is kind of commercial-like, isn't that? I'm just trying to run down them. So Walton's has everything but the meat. Purina's got everything for your food. You don't need anything else besides Purina. Gunner Kennels has the best kennels and food crates, which should have Purina in them. Garmin, it is the best in canine training and navigation, hands down. Canine Athlete, everything else you need in the supplements for your dog, from new dog to hydrate and to cover and probiotics, which actually I used on my wife's corgi the other day. He apparently was eating some paper towels, and we didn't know it. And all of a sudden, he had problems holding his poop, and he pooped in the kennel. And then I had to wash the kennel out. Looked like kind of by the time I washed that kennel out, I realized there was a lot of paper towel. Anyway, I gave him some probiotic, kind of leveled his stomach out. We put him on rice and pumpkin, and guess what? Dog's fine. W Hunting Supply, where you can get any of the Garmin products. And if you're not into Garmin, well, you haven't graduated yet, but they carry everything you could possibly use. The deck drawer system, which 80% of everything I just told you can fit into your deck drawer. Boy, they could have used a different name for that. Decked drawer system. My Shooting Sportsman magazine, which comes every couple months. I'm going to be interviewing Tom Davis, a longtime writer. I've been reading Tom for years. Tom and I exchanged some emails, and as soon as he gets back from Iowa the week after next, Tom's going to come on, and we're going to have a great episode. I might even just drive to Iowa and do that one. Or not, he's going to Iowa. He's from Wisconsin, and I might just make the drive over there and do it in person. We'll see how that works out. And the Upland Institute, be a better trainer. If you had any issues this year, if you're not really happy with your dog's performance, could be genetics, could be your lack of training. Check out Upland Institute and be a better trainer. There. Now, back to the show. So I got this plaque. I'm going to read it. This is what I've sent to many people, and you probably, longtime listeners, have heard me read it maybe a half a dozen times over 7 years. This is from George Bird Evans. Having bird dogs, you distill your life to a succession of short lives, each of them a dog's. From each, you learn a little of the joy of living. Observing his inexhaustible enthusiasms between naps, his eagerness that makes each day more significant for being a day in a life so short. You watch the pup grow out of him as he becomes more serious, but there is always a good-natured disposition and his faith in you. There are people who have children in the hope of providing themselves with someone to be there in the end. For your dog, it is only you who are there when that time comes. A right thing, for it puts you in a position of doing something for him after he has done so much for you. Now, I could get through that because, like I said, I haven't had to bury a dog in a while. Anyway, so that is inscribed on this plaque, and then I am going to have most of the names you're going to hear. I'm going to have most of these names, well, not all of them, because a lot of them are still alive. But I thought I've never taken an episode and talked about my history with dogs. Okay? And I'm going to miss a few. There's a few I won't mention. But the ones that kind of either I learned something from or were part of my life or that were the stars in my life. So I got to start all the way back. I think this is where, my exposure to dogs. This is not a bird dog. This was our house dog. His name was Sandy. We got them from my mom's friends, the Simons. Everybody, when we were kids, you always mention the last name, the Johnsons, the Hartleys, the Townsends, the Simons, okay? And it was a Shetland sheepdog, and we named it Sandy. I think my sister named it Sandy. There's a picture of me about 5 years old, maybe 4 years old. Hard to tell. It's an old color Polaroid of me and Sandy when he was a puppy. And being the youngest child in the family, my sisters were both of my sisters were quite a bit older than me. It was kind of like being a singleton, other than the fact that I grew up on the south side of Chicago with, average of 5.6 kids per house. So I had plenty of friends. But at the house, it was just me, all right, and Sandy. So Sandy made it till I remember really well when Sandy died. I was 15 years old because I had a driver's permit, but I couldn't drive the car, obviously, by myself. And I was a bus boy. And this particular job, a lot of times I would take my bike to work. I could, but it was wintertime out. And I think I went there after school, and then my dad came and picked me up. And I'll never forget this. I won't go, other than saying Sandy was a great house dog, and Sandy was just, Sandy was a dog, and this was popular. Believe it, you're not going to believe how we house trained this dog. Back in the day, you used to put newspapers down, and we did it in our basement. So Sandy learned to relieve himself in the basement on the Chicago Tribune, or whatever paper we got. I forget which paper we got, and you laid papers out, and in the morning you got up and you went downstairs and you rolled them up, like, fold in, roll, fold in, make sure the poop's in there, yellow, dry stained. Our basement always smelled like a kennel. So maybe that early imprint, I don't know, didn't bother anybody. It was just our basement. Back in the day, the only thing you did, Mom would go down there and do laundry, and Dad had a workbench down there. That was it, and the rest was storage. And that's where Sandy's bathroom was. Now, of course, Sandy lived outside during the day. I'm sure he didn't wait till he got in at night to go to the newspaper. But we newspaper trained him. Now, it's weird, but I know other people that did it. I know other people in my neighborhood that did it. Maybe we were supposed to eventually take those newspapers and put them on the porch and then the yard, and then he'd get the hang of it. Anyway, till the day Sandy died, overnight in the house, he would either pee or poop on newspaper. And it was my job to roll up that newspaper and take it out to the garbage in the alley. And that was my job. And that was Sandy. And I got a ride home from my dad, and the house we had an electric garage door opener on it. So in 1972, I think that was when Sandy died. No, 73 or 4. No, 72. We had an electric garage door. Now, that was, believe it or not very common, because when we got this house, I was only 5. And the guy who owned this house, this thing was a gigantic monster of a motor, okay? I mean, big, and it had a big electric push button. There was no remote with it. You got out of the car, you went in the service door, you pushed this big black button, and the door went up. And I'll never forget it. Dad pulled up in the alley, and I jump out. It's my job to go up and open the door. And as I opened the door, there's Sandy laying there on the concrete. And I ran up and I stopped Dad from backing into the garage, and I picked him up. I moved him. Dad went in, and basically, he was old. I don't know how old he was, but certainly he was over 10, at least. And I think he was 11, but he was just dead. And there was no reviving him. There was no nothing to it. And Dad got out of the car, and he said, "Oh, sorry about that." And I think I was probably crying a little bit. No, I wasn't. I'm sure I was sad, just sad. But I'll never forget, my dad handed me a shovel, and we had a garden along the fence. And he says, "Well, that'd be about the only place in the yard you could bury him." My dad went in the house. I got the shovel, and I started digging. Sandy was not a big dog, maybe 35 pounds. And I started digging, and I dug, and I dug, and I dug, because I figured, well, I've been to funerals before. They put them pretty far down on the ground. I remember my dad came out, He says, "What are you doing?" I says, I'm digging a grave for Sandy. He goes, "Well, you ain't going to have to dig to China." I'm like, "Well, sorry, Dad. You could have dug the hole and not even told me about it." But anyway, I buried Sandy, and I'm going to say that was 1972. And so that was my first dog, our house dog. And that was my love of dogs. He was just there to watch TV with and watch movies. When it was a rainy day, nobody was playing, other kids were on vacation, whatever. Sandy was my buddy, always was my buddy. Not an over affectionate, not a needy dog, but would always come up and you could always pet him. And but he didn't jump on the couch, and actually he wasn't allowed on the furniture. Wasn't even allowed in the front room. But it's amazing how we could train him to not do certain things, but we still train him to shit and piss in the basement. Beyond me. Anyway, Mom and Dad are long gone, so I can't tell them why that philosophy worked or what was the deal with it. But maybe somebody can write me. Maybe there was an article back in the 50s that said, "Paper train your dog." I don't know. Anyway, so that was the first dog I ever considered my dog because my sisters were older. It was my job to take care of them and feed them and roll up those newspapers. And fast forward, there was a couple dogs when I was in my late teens, early 20s that were just in and out. A wandered-in dog that stuck around for a couple years, a golden retriever that was in my possession that I did not buy. Anyway, fast forward to moving to Michigan. Now, I had talked a friend of mine, Frank, into getting a black lab from the pound. I think you've heard me talk about that in the past. And this is when Frank and I and Rusty and Roof were all bachelors living in a house in Bridgeport, in Mayor Daley's neighborhood in Chicago. We were all footloose and fancy-free, a bunch of wild young 20-somethings. And I talked Frank, because Frank used to pheasant hunt with me and Roof, and I said, "We need a dog. We need a dog." And I finally talked Frank into going. We went to the pound and got the first black dog we could get. It didn't turn out to be anything with a lab, I don't think. Never hunted. Became Frank's dog. Frank had it forever. Frank had it for 15, 16 years. Anyway, that dog's name was Midnight. I do not include Midnight in my list of dogs, but hats off to Midnight. Now I'm in Michigan now. And I want a bird dog because I met Jeff Peterman, and he had a German short hair. And Winger, I don't know where he got the name Winger from, but Winger was a real German short hair that pointed birds, grouse and woodcock. And I had to get a dog. And I talked to my wife. I said, "Can we get a dog?" And I did say, "Can we get a dog?" We got 3 little kids in the house, or maybe 2 and 1 on the way. I can't remember. And she saw an ad in a paper in a little town in North Muskegon that said, "German short-hair pointer, $45. And she said, "What about this?" I'm like, "Okay." I drove over to the person's house. I gave them the money. They handed me the dog. There was no papers. He was an oversized, probably 85, 90-pound German short-hair, solid liver, a couple little spots on his chest. But gosh darn it, I thought I had a hunting dog. I did. And I won't go into, there isn't enough, I'd have to do 5 episodes just to talk about the shit that dog pulled. But I will say, in hindsight, you'll learn a lesson from it, okay? I could have ended up with some great dog that didn't like kids in the house and could have bit my kids. I could have ended up with a dog that was gun shy. He was not. He was neither. What he was a runaway dog. And I mean runaway. Twice returned to me, once by the National Forest Service ranger in the Manistee National Forest. Found decimated, sleeping by a creek. Decimated is not the right word. Half starved. Came back, then he was a good dog again until we got him filled up, fed up, and plumped back up again and got his muscle back. And he proceeded to run away again and never pointed anything that I could eat. He wasn't bad at duck hunting. I took him duck hunting a couple times. Good retriever. He liked the kids. He laid around. The kids could dress him up, play with him. But if he decided he was going to be gone, JD was gone. But he was the first attempt at a sporting dog. And then my friend Mike Rosema, who actually worked for me a little bit part-time, he had a German short-hair pointer, and he also knew Jeff Peterman. And he gave me an impregnated female, that he did not tell his wife that he did that he got her, bred to another short hair, and it was causing what would say a little strife in the family. And he knew JD had run away. I think the third time JD ran away, we never saw him again. I'm sure it was the third time. And this took a few years, trust me. Anyway, Mike gave me Sadie. Sadie was probably 3 weeks from being due with puppies. I did not have the kennel built. I did not have outside kennels built. We did have a garage, and we only put one car in the garage. So I had my friend Jeff show me how to make a whelping box, and I put a brooder light from Farm and Fleet, a little red brooder light in there, and she started living in that garage. And that was an experience of whelping for the first time. And I'll never forget, Jeff would come over and call me up every day, or just stop by after work, and he'd say, how's she doing? How's she doing? I said, I don't know. I mean, we didn't even know enough to put a thermometer in her butt and see if her temperature had dropped so we'd be ready. She just lived in the garage. She wasn't a runaway dog. You could let her out. She'd walk around the yard. I have no idea. I should probably someday get a hold of Mike. I still run into him from time to time and say, what were you thinking? Where did you get her from? But she had, I forget I want to say it was 3 or 4 or 5 puppies. But I do remember my daughters were all excited. So, yeah, Jessie was a lot. I think she was very small, and the twins were still small. And I think they were watching DuckTales a lot on cable, and that was the Donald Duck and all that stuff. And for some reason, the 3 puppies I had that we kind of raised were, of course, the kids named them Huey, Dewey, and Louie, right out of the comics, right? Just to say, Sadie went back. Huey, Dewey, and Louie never amounted up to anything like more than Manny, Mo, and Jack. They just didn't have it. If I'm not mistaken, a friend took Huey. I kept Dewey and Louie long enough to try to figure out, these dogs just don't seem to have any hunt in them. Now, granted, they were young, but I'll bet you they were probably 7, 8 months old. And I went out with both of those to a kennel, which comes back into my history later, was Pine Hill Kennel in Rockford, Michigan. I got a hold of the owner of that, which was actually where I think that was probably the first time I might have met Justin McGrail when he was a teenager. It was that or when I got a dog from Jim Ripkema. But anyway, I had to pay him money. I said I wanted, somebody told me to do this. I needed to get my dogs evaluated. I don't think they got much hunt. And I remember he put I think he had quail at the time. It's a little, my memories are vague. So he put some birds out for him, and we walked the pups around. And again, pups being not toddlers, but teenager. They were big enough to tell what they were going to be. And I mean, these dogs didn't care about a bird flying. They saw the bird walking in front of them. They looked at each other. There's one of the mistakes you learn. Never, unless you're a professional kennel, never keep 2 dogs from the same litter. They become best friends. They don't care about nothing else. It's not anything that the amateur should do, is to keep 2 pups from a litter. Put that in your long-term memory. But on top of that, these dogs just didn't have much. And I found homes for these 2 dogs. Fast forward, this will be probably the 3rd dog that'll actually go on. And I keep dogs in regard for this plaque. The dogs that are going to make the plaque are the dogs that I spent a lot of time with and either died early, died natural causes, died of something terrible, whatever. In JD's case, I can't not help but put him on that plaque, but I don't know how his life ended. But I got a feeling he starved to death back in the Manistee National Forest once again. But Queenie, I decided to I needed some money. Now, my wife's barometer for a German short hair was $45. And that was, I'm not saying it was a lot of money back in the day, but she thought, you're not going to be spending $200-300 on a dog. Well, when I took the dogs out to Pine Hill Kennel, Jim said, if you're looking for a good dog, I have litters. I don't know if it was once or twice a year. And that was in the back of my mind. He says, come out here and get a dog for me. And I remember the males would be $250 and the females would be $350. And that was real common. They always figured, well, you're going to pay more. If you want to breed it someday, it's going to cost you another $100. And I'm not sure the timeline, but the seed was planted in there. And being in construction, all my bills got invoiced by my wife. The money came to the mailbox. She deposited the money. I didn't have a way of saying, can we slide $350 in case I want a female? I don't know if that was going to fly, okay? But what I did do was I moonlit. I did a little moonlighting. But the funny part was I moonlighted on my own company. So we would, on occasions, of the many things I did in the material handling world, conveyors, racks, mezzanines, shelving systems, storage systems, one of the things I did on a quite regular basis for some companies was called an Implant Office. It's like a 4-wall kit. Walls, doors, windows, ceiling, suspended ceiling on the inside. We'd walk away, the electricians would come in and wire it, and the plant would now have a little foreman's office by a dock or an extra office, in some cases a lunchroom. Anyway, every once in a while, we would have to tile the floor. I didn't know anything about tiling floors, but I knew in the trades, talk to a floor tiler, get a little assistance, and I did. And so on occasion, when a customer would say, hey, does this come with tile? I said, no. I looked on the material list. Nope, there's no tile. He says, he said, I should have got tile for it. And of course, I would say, well, if you go to the store and buy some composition asphalt tile, I know how to put it down. I didn't, but there was no YouTube back then. But again, I watched some guys in the trades do it, and surely didn't look that difficult. All you need is a good tile cutter for that stuff. And sure enough, like for $100, I put the mastic down on the floor and I would tile this little 10 by 12 building, And that was my money. That was like, okay, if I'm going to stay late and do this, and I know Sue doesn't listen to the podcast, and my daughter does, or some of them do, and I'm going to have to ask for forgiveness instead of permission on that one, because I did a couple of side jobs like that, and I had a little money in my pocket. So called up Jim. I asked him what his next litter was. He said, I got a litter on the ground right now. Come out and look at them. And I went out there, and I think there was 6 or 7 males. And I told him I wanted a female because of the JD. I said, I don't want a male dog. Male dogs just run away. Of course, that's not always true. But that was how much dog knowledge I had at the time. And he said, well, take a look at these dogs. And Jim pulled out the old fishing rod with the string, right? And I'm just going to say 7. These 7 puppies were in a playpen area, outside run, and he started whipping that string around. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 little short hair pups, all white with some brown patches and solid liver heads. They were Mosgard. I won't say Mosgard line bred, but there was a lot of Mosgard in the lines because I still got her pedigree. And these dogs all pointed that wing. Of course, I want one. Now at this point, I just got to pick out one. They all had brown heads. They all had white bodies. They all had tails sticking up like a, well, anyway, they're there. I mean, they all looked the same. It would just be a matter of what patch I wanted, like a side patch, a rump patch. And it was one of the first times I decided to not do something. And I said, Jim, I want one so bad, but I promised myself I would only take a female. Only. And I said, I'll wait till the next litter. And Jim said, well, these are the ones I'm selling. I do have a female, but it's going to be more money. And I said, how much more money? So instead of $250, it was $350. And I thought, I've got it. I said, let me see the dog. I didn't want the wing on the string. I just wanted to meet her. I met her. She looked just like her brothers. And boom, my first good German short hair. And she was, I won't go into all the birds and all the places I took her, but she was on those first hunts to South Dakota. Jeff and I, Jeff had Winger. We had all the aspirations of starting a kennel line, but of course Winger was as bow-legged as I am, and we knew enough not to breed those two together. But I found one over near Gladwin, Michigan, a male with some credentials, and did my first breeding with her, and more mistakes made, right down to Jeff and I are going to start tattooing them. Even though they're not German registered, we bought a tattoo kit. And Jeff made side money too. He was an electrician, and his wife, Holly, she ran the books, but electricians always get called for side jobs. So Jeff always had a little side job money too for decoys and this and that and kennel panels. And so we got a tattoo kit. We even decided on our first couple litters that I bred her, we would dock tails and do dew claws. Story for another podcast. Anyway, so Queenie. So right now we got Sandy, my first dog. JD's going to go on the plaque. And Queenie, my first good dog that I paid fair market value for and got more dog than I ever had before, and more dog than a lot of people ever had. Well, now I'm a hunter. Now I'm a traveling wing shooter. And I start getting all the subscriptions, Gun Dog, Shooting Sportsman. Back in the day, I forget if it was Upland Almanac or a different name. But, and if I didn't have that magazine subscription, Jeff did, and we traded magazines. And we're on our way out to South Dakota for what would be I believe our third trip, second or third trip out there. And I read about this article about the German wire hair. Now, back in the day, you heard the term Drahthaar, okay? But even some of the Drahthaar guys didn't say Drahthaar. They just said these dogs are registered with the VDD, GNA, blah, blah, blah. So, and this dog had a lot of Drahthaar, as we say now, in it, okay? And who became a later friend of mine, Dwayne Stahl, was the breeder in Freeman, South Dakota. I saw the ad. I called them up. From the ad I got in the magazine, it sounded like they were ready to go. And we were there in October-ish, end of October, beginning of November, which is our typical time frame. And I remember going in there on the second day of the hunt, we had a snowstorm. So I called up, and I got a hold of Dwayne's wife, and she said, "You can come over and look at the pups. I'm home," and Dwayne wasn't. So in this snowstorm, we had Jerry drive because Jerry could fly a plane, a bulldozer, operate a crane, and if you wanted somebody to drive in a snowstorm, you had Jerry drive. You didn't have me drive because just the way it was. So we get there. I remember Jeff and I, probably Roof and Jerry, we're in the kennel. And there's this litter of wire hairs. And I see the mom, and I didn't see the dad. I think the dad was in Canada. And there was let's say there was 8 of them, and 7 of them were liver tick, which is a typical wire hair color. And the sire was a black wire hair. And of course, I gravitated to the oddball puppy. And of course, Jeff knew what I thought was way more about dogs than I did, because when I met Jeff, he had Winger, and Winger hunted. Winger came when called. He loaded in the kennel. I thought he had a dog. And he's trying to steer me to this one male, and I'm trying to steer myself to this black one. And Jeff's like, I wouldn't get the brown one. Get one of the brown ones. Get one of these two. One of these two. These two are really friendly. Look at the way they're coming around. And of course, now I see stars. The grass is greener. The color's darker. So whatever it is, I told his wife, I said, I'll take that one. And many of you have heard the stories of Haskell. He made it for a long. He was a big part of my kennel, of my learning, of my early NAVDA testing. He was the first puppy I ever tested an NA in. And all my friends in NAVDA said, "Why didn't you ever test Queenie? She was the only good dog you had." But that's what friends do. We bust on each other. Haskell put me through my paces, and that's when I learned what cooperation is in a dog. Genetically, Queenie had all the desire, all the talents, but she had a balance of cooperation because I was not in any way, shape, or form a trainer. But now I got Haskell. He passed his puppy test because he had raw talent. But what he didn't have, cooperation. He didn't have an ounce of it. Well, right along this time is when I've been getting into, NAVDA, and that's why I saw this NAVDA kennel. And I went up to the NAVDA chapter up in Traverse City, and I started hanging out with them. And so I'm coming home after the hunting trip. We stopped back in Freeman, picked up the pup, brought it home, and now I have a German Wirehair named Haskell. And that was the beginning of the end, in a way, but the beginning of the beginning. And Haskell got me really reading up about the German Wirehairs. And I remember Judy Baylog. She asked me if I had his papers. And back then, there was very few versatile champions. I mean, probably, 10, 20 in the country. The test had just been formatted not too many years before that. Anyway, she looked at Haskell's papers. She didn't see him in the field, but she looked at his papers, the pedigree, and she's like, "Oh, my God, his father is a versatile champion. Do you know what that means? My God, this puppy is going to be the second coming of Christ." He was more like the second coming of Satan, but he was the second coming of something. And I'll never forget that. And Judy, if you're listening to this, that's the God's honest truth. You were so impressed by that VC title on his papers that you told me I had something there. I did. I had something I couldn't control because it had no cooperation and I had no training. But this all melds into the NAVDA life, okay? Now I've got this dog that I'm going to test. And now I'm going to try to train it. And now I'm going to rely on other people in NAVDA to help me train it. Those stories could go on forever. But Haskell is definitely going to go down on this plaque. So Haskell is going to be on my plaque of all-time dogs that I've owned and that I know that I didn't give away, that I didn't just, there's some dogs you're going to hear because I'm going down my history of dogs that I only had for a little while. And they're not going to go on the plaque. But Haskell will definitely go on the plaque. He spurred more stories and gave me my favorite dog, which is where we're getting next. I met a fella up in the Traverse City chapter test, the Northern Michigan chapter of NAVDA. His name was Reinhold Hessler, and he was from Germany, and he came here, I'm assuming it was right after World War II, possibly right before. He was a machinist, and he had a Drahtar kennel. His dogs were registered in NAVDA. And at that point in his life, I don't think he was sticking to the rules were a little looser back in the day. Let me back that up a little bit. So back when I had Haskell, he had some VDD line in him. And let's say if there was a VDD Wirehair kennel near me, which there was several of them. Ken Whitney had a dog in a kennel. Dick DeCam did. Gary had, Gary, can't remember your last name. These were all the Kalamazoo friends of mine. And you could, if you were in the VDD, you could breed your sire to a NAVDA registered female. That wasn't prohibited. That didn't happen until years later. And then years later, the VDD said, no outcrossing to other lines of German Wirehairs. You had to be registered. The dog had to be tested. Both dogs had to be in the system. Save that for an episode I'm doing this spring when I go to the big VDD test. Got a really great one coming up this spring. I'm going to interview we're really going to dive deep Yeah, you know the ones who want to hear that episode. I know a lot of you do. We're going to get deep into VDD in Deutsche Drahthaars. Deutsche Drahthaar. Anyway, so Reinhold was kind of a little bit of a rebel, you know. He kind of figured, look, I know more about these German dogs. He was a Jagdmeister in Germany. He had his dogs were all from Germany. He bred them, and it was what was the name of that kennel? Gosh darn it, Timberwolf, Treberwolf. Treberwolf. I've still got his business card. And his wife's name was Renata, which is like Mary, you know. Reinhold is like Ronald in German, right? Reinhold, Ronald. In fact, my grandma, Reinhold, she'd call me. I don't maybe that's Ronald in German. Anyway, he kind of took me under his wing, and he had a dog that was aging out of that he did not want to breed again. And her name was Cora. Cora was a woolly. I mean woolly. That dog needed a sheep shear. But in the German breeding, you don't throw out the baby with the bathwater, but you would not breed that dog to another woolly dog, okay? And he made me an offer to buy Cora, and I think he wanted a pup back or something like that. And, of course, I'm, okay, I'll do anything. I got 3 kennels now, and, you know, I got a roof over the kennel, and, you know, I got some nice winter dog boxes. Now, I'm accumulating a lot of stuff. I'm accumulating a lot of stuff in the dog world. You know, this is what we all do. You all know it. You guys that are brand new, you've already got Onyx. You've already got your shotgun. You're thinking about your next shotgun. You're like, well, I guess I'm going to have a Garmin collar, or whether Dogtra or DT or whatever. It's like duck hunting. It's like golfing. It's like anything. You get into it with both feet, and you are going to be spending your allowance, and your Christmas presents are all going to be based on what you need for your hobby. So I was gung-ho. I had the kennels built, just a 3 separated kennels, and I told Reinhold I would do it. So I got Cora. Cora goes down in the history of another lesson learned dog. Now, I did keep Cora till she died. I think I got her at 5, and I think she had 2 litters with Reinhold, and this was going to be her last litter. A lot of this is kind of vague. I wish Reinhold lived to be pretty ripe old age, but, you know, he's not around to ask him. And so Cora would get out of the kennel. She could hunt. She'd point, retrieve like a son of a gun, would never come to me. Now, in the field, she would come to me, and I'd get her back in the truck, and, you know, that wasn't a real issue. The first breeding I tried to do with Haskell and Cora, I thought took. It didn't take. I remember Jeff came over. Jeff and I were as thick as thieves when it came to this dog stuff. Like, whatever I built, he built, or whatever he built, I built. We built our training tables on the same weekend. We literally went to a chapter-sponsored Purina trained retrieve clinic. Jeff and I drove down to Kalamazoo. It was at a field house. And we went down to Kalamazoo, and I wish I could remember. I think the last name was Rigler. He was a Purina rep. He was, you know, he didn't work for Purina, but he was under the Purina umbrella. And he was a trainer. And, you know, we're gung-ho into all this stuff. And we wanted to learn how to do the trained retrieve. And believe it or not, this fella either took ill, couldn't make it, the schedule got mixed up. And the person we got was Clyde Vetter. Now, Clyde, I don't even think he was old enough to shave. It's a joke, Clyde, if you're listening. But he was young. He was probably the youngest guy in the building. There was probably 40 of us, and I always remember there was a lot of Labrador people there, and I raised my hand like an idiot and said, I understand why some of us are here, but I thought Labradors retrieved. And you could have seen the glaring looks on some of these people's faces, right? And so anyway, yeah, the first kind of pro clinic I went to was Purina sponsored, and Clyde Vetter showed up, and we watched him on a table taken some dogs through some hold and carry, a little collar, just all some basics. And we were just in awe. Like, we didn't know you could do something like that with a dog. My God. So, of course, Jeff and I ran home. This is where I'm all going with this. We raced to build our training table, and I always remember mine was the standard height, let's say 20 inches tall, and Jeff's was 24. And I said, yours is too tall. Yours is too tall, Jeff. He goes, I'm 6'4", Ron. You're 5 foot nothing. So I'm like, okay, but I'm going to have a hard time when I'm at your house, working on your table. Anyway, what I'm getting at is you're all in, right? You're on your third dog. You are all in. This is a lifestyle. You got bumpers coming in the mail. You can't pass up. You can't pass up a PetSmart without going in and get your next bag of dog food, or the farm store, which is where I got my dog food. If they had some bumpers up there, yeah, I need another bumper. I need another whistle, So Cora was that. I learned my lesson dog. She would not come to me in the yard. If she got out, and I always let my dogs out right around the house. At this point, none of my dogs were runaway dogs. They really weren't. They would hang around. They might cross the street, and we got a sand road, and of course it's dangerous. But I would open up the kennels and get them all sprayed out. I poured the concrete. In fact, Mikey Rosema, all the way back to Sadie, helped me pour that concrete, and we put a curb in it. And at the end of the curb was a block and a trough, and the trough ran to a drain field, which was my first. There was like a company that sold these. Like little mini septic tank. You dug a hole, you put it in the ground, and it was all perforated. You put rocks in it, and you put this stuff in it, and the poop would go in there. And, of course, all the pee and the water would go in there, and it would drain into the ground. It was its own little drain field septic system. It was pretty cool. So, I'm feeling all like, I got a hose, I got a sprayer, I got dogs, and I got Cora. But Cora, I could call Haskell to me. Queenie never gave me I don't think I ever had to yell at Queenie in my entire life, except when she got deaf. And I mean, she got deaf at the end. But Cora would just sit outside the kennel. She reminded me of Dave Dean's last wire hair, Belle, that we stopped at a truck stop or a rest area to let Belle out and relieve herself. And he didn't put her on a leash. And he said, Belle, come. Belle, come. Belle, come. And we're making snowballs for her to see if she'll fetch a snowball, which she'd love to fetch. She'd pick the snowball up, eat it, and look at him. And I'm like, Dave, I'm cold. I'm going to try. It took Dave 20 minutes to get this dog because you couldn't catch her. And this is what Cora did. She was a sweetheart. But she did not want to go back in the kennel unless it involved, in her mind, a hunt, which is mean when we're out in the field, I could drop the tailgate, dog jump in the box. She doesn't know she's going home or she's going to another cover for grouse. And I would have to get my daughters. This dog loved my daughters. And I would just go to the house, Kelsey, Mackie, Jesse, whoever was there, my wife, Sue, you got to go out and get Cora. You got to go get Cora. Cora's being Cora again, okay? And they would say, Cora, come. And Cora would run to them. They'd pet her, grab her by the collar, put her in the kennel. Okay, Dad, we're good. So I learned a lot from Cora, too. And sometimes, and you'll hear this when we keep going down the dog list, Cora taught me a lot that there are some dogs that, something that happens to them where they're being held, they can't let go of it. Maybe Reinhold didn't tell me that Cora never went in her kennel unless she went hunting. I don't know. But there's always little things you get when you get a dog, especially an older dog, that I don't want to say haunt you, but you'll never figure out. And then you just anthropomorphize it into like, well, you know what her problem is? She doesn't like me. I'm like, well, no, she likes me in the field. There ain't any problem with me in the field. So what's the deal? Some habit she developed, I didn't know how to break it. Of course, I don't have a check cord on her, and I didn't put a collar on her. But I don't even think I owned an e-collar at the time. I know I had beeper collars. I was a big beeper collar guy when they came out. Every beeper collar that came out, I bought. I still got one from Lovett's. Anybody ever heard of Lovett's out of Indiana? That was a damn good collar. I found it probably not too many years ago in a crate, a box of shit I've moved around for decades. And that son of a gun still worked. Now, it felt like about a 2-pound necklace on the dog. It was huge, and it was deafening loud. But I took that apart, put a battery in it. It had them little, they look like little fat, short AA's. You know what I'm saying? It's like a 1, 2, 3 or something battery. Anyway, that thing still works. Anyway, so, yeah, I learned a lot from that. Like, you don't know what you're going to get in a dog. Try not to judge it. Try not to work around it. But I wasn't into the problem solving yet. That's going to come later down the road when I talk about a couple other dogs. So Cora and Haskell made another dog. No, I'm sorry, wait. Before I got to that dog, okay, there was Desi. Now, Desi, I also got from Reinhold. Desi was 9 months old when I got her. And I remember a friend said, oh, she's not going to bond with you. You got to get a puppy at, you remember that one book that came out? The Walters book? You got to get him at 49 days. There's a lesson I learned from this. That's a bunch of shit, okay? A dog with good cooperation, good genetics, will go with anybody, anywhere, handle for anybody. And some of you are going to go like, no, my dog won't jump into another person's truck. Then I'm going to tell you that that's the one thing missing from your dog. If you got your dog loose, you want your dog to like other people just as much as you, so they could see it on the road. And I can tell you stories down the road, and I will, of dogs of mine that got out, jumped a gate, chased another dog, and people returned the dog to me. They said, no, I opened the door. He came right to me. I looked on the collar, called you, okay? So Desi was that dog, 9 months old, had never been in the field. Reinhold's health was, I don't want to say failing. It probably was, but he was certainly downsizing. That's why he gave me, that's why I bought Cora from him, or maybe I just got Cora with the agreement to get a pup back. And I don't even remember if I gave him a pup back. I really don't remember. But Desi, I used to go up to Reinhold's and have breakfast. Renata would make these wonderful, unbelievable, what I call German breakfasts with a soft-boiled egg, a little shot of Jägermeister, some salmon, smoked salmon, some dry toast, rye bread. Oh, my God. It was, and years later when I went to Europe, I'm like, yeah, this is what she was making. I never had a breakfast. My breakfast was always eggs and bacon. This is like a buffet she used to set out. So anyway, Desi comes to me at 9 months of age, and she is a sweetheart. I mean, I could go. She was like, she was like Taffy. Let's jump into the end of the list. But I could go, bam, right to me. What's up? What do you need? Didn't have to do anything to that dog. She just hunted. I remember taking her to my neighbors across the street, Jerry's property. They have 100 and maybe 200 acres total. And there was an old pond back there that they dug years ago. Somebody dug, road commission dug it or something. Anyway, little pond, maybe 50 feet by 30 feet oval, had trees around it. And I took her out there because now, of course, I've already done some NAVDA testing. Haskell got his NA and couldn't, well, he could have passed utility with a good trainer. He just didn't have one at the time. But I got to get Desi on the mark. I'm going to run Desi. She's 9 months old. And I'm going to get her in spring test. I'm going to run her. And I said, the ice was off the big lakes, but I went to this wood lot way back on Jerry's property, and I brought a bumper. And I remember the ice was the way the sun came down in this wood lot. The sun came down and melted the ice probably for about 6 feet, maybe 8 feet. Okay. On my side of the pond. I walked down, I'm like, oh, there's open water here. And it was just skim ice. Nah, maybe not even skim, but maybe a quarter-inch thick. That ice in another couple days would have receded all the way back across the pond. And I got a couple bumpers, and I'm out there with her, and she was just a joy. She was the first dog, Queenie was never an affectionate dog, going back to my first good short hair. She was a worker. She was built like Arnold Schwarzenegger. She had a front end on her that looked like she had pectoral muscles, right? And she wasn't a needy dog. She just wanted to hunt, And if she didn't hunt, she just laid around. She was 100% kennel dog. She was never trained for the house. I don't think Queenie ever put her foot inside of a house. Some of my dogs did. Haskell actually started out in the house. Cora even came in once in a blue moon. But now Desi, I got this dog. She's not only just cooperative, she really likes me. You could just tell. She'd come to you with a bumper, and her eyes would lock on your eyes, just like Taffy's does. And I didn't force break her or anything. Obviously, she was 9 months old. I just got her. And I took that bumper, and I always go to thinking about, well, you tell somebody at a test, at the NA water test, you say, all right, take a bumper. I want you to throw it out there about 10, 12 feet. That's swimming depth. That's all you need to do. Don't throw it short. Don't throw it. It doesn't need to go way out into the pond. All we need to do is see your dog swim. And I always laugh at myself, inside at the handlers, especially new handlers, that either A, can't judge distance, or B, throw like they've never thrown a bumper in their life. It either falls 3 feet from the dog, or it ends up going 20 feet, and they're like, oh, God. And I'm like, yeah, don't give your dog the first one long, Well, dummy me, I'm down here. I got about 6 feet of open water, and I know this pond. I've been back there before with the dogs in the summertime. And we used to take dogs there to cool them down after running them on the hayfield. And I throw the bumper, and it goes onto the ice, just like I was pitching quarters, and it just went flop, 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 boom. And Desi, to my knowledge, had never had her feet in water. Now, Reinhold might have had her in the water last summer. Don't know. Didn't ask him. And she took a leap from a standing position on that bank. And when she landed, she overshot the bumper, broke the ice, got the bumper, and swam back. And I was like, I have arrived. I have a dog that I've never literally met before. Not only loves me, looks me in the eyes. She just jumped, broke ice. It didn't bother her. She went, I threw the bumper again, this time. Now the ice is broken up, so I threw the bumper out there about 6 feet. Same thing. Leaps, just. She goes so high in the air that she goes underwater when she hits. You've seen it. I've seen it. I've seen it a bunch of times. And so now I've got something. This dog is the dog I'm going to concentrate on. Haskell, I'm going to hunt. He's going to go to South Dakota with me. Cora we didn't do another litter with Cora, and I think Cora died at 8, a couple of years later. Don't remember the ramifications. I do remember putting her down. She had a mass in her or something like that, and we did an X-ray, and that was another one. And again, someday on some podcast, I'm not saying I don't cry from time to time about the passing of a dog, but there's a thing here, that I think George Bird Evans could have expounded on. This ain't for the sissies, okay? This ain't for the emotional. You can love things to death, but you also got to accept the death of things. And that goes in every aspect of life, from careers to family to whatever, okay? To moving away from home to bad shit that happens. Okay, we're not going to get into that. But Desi was that dog. I've got the dog. This dog, everyone told me you can't get a 9-month-old dog. It won't know you. It's going to be barn sour. No, Desi hunted. She started that next year. She did great. I did her, I forget what her NA score was. It was good. I think it was a 110. Somebody could probably look that up. It's out there. She was just, that was the next best dog. Now, Queenie is built as she was. I was not going to breed her again. I did breed her, this is going back 3 dogs. But I really had the wire hair in my head here. So along the way came a litter of dogs. I was on the road. We'll get off of Desi for a second. And along the way, I always traveled for work. My job, in my business, we call it chasing your job. The next job is in Toledo. The next job's in Oklahoma City. So I'd be gone for 1, 2, maybe if it was more than that, I'd come home and go back. I got 3 little kids at home, and the kids are a little bigger now. And I remember Mackie and Kelsey, my twins, they were in charge of the kennels whenever I was gone. So it was their job to feed them. It was their job to wash the kennels, scoop up the poop, and feed them again at night. And then when I would call home, which, back, we're not talking, a dial-up phone, but we're not talking car phone. No, we're not talking cell phones yet here, I think there might have been a bag phone in someone's life, but not in my life. But I would get in the motel, call home, see how everything was, and ask the girls, how's the dogs? And I'll never forget, Mackenzie says, hey, Dad, Haskell is in Queenie's cage. And I said, well, who put the dogs back after feeding them? Now, I'm a little like my own dad. You kind of jump to conclusions first. You blame it on the kids, or you blame it on her sister. Not the girl's telling me's fault. It's probably your sister's fault. She probably didn't pay attention. She opened the door and dogs ran in. She goes, no, I locked them up last night, and this morning when we went to school, Haskell was in Queenie's kennel. Well, the only way you could do that is to climb, literally. I had a roof, but the roof wasn't at the top of the roof was just there for rain and for snow, so the kennels would stay dry. There was no walls around it. And I said, well, obviously put him back in his kennel. Nothing. Did not, where this is going. I know you can tell where this is going. So next day, get done with the day's work, go call home, talk to Jesse, talk to Kelsey, talk to Mackie, talk to my wife, and one of them says, oh, by the way, Haskell is in Queenie's kennel again. And I'm like, oh, I wonder if she's in heat. So my wife goes out and looks, and she could tell. My wife did not have a lot to do with the dogs. I mean, she's got her house dogs. Some of my dogs she thinks she's crazy about. Other ones, I think Cora was the one that one day she was on a walk with me out behind, and I knew that Sue could put Cora away. And Cora saw the belt she had on a jacket. We were walking out in the back in the woods, and the belt flapped open, and I remember the belt was like bouncing off of Sue's butt or thigh, It was just because the belt wasn't tied. And I remember Cora came up, jumped up, grabbed that belt, and also grabbed a good chunk of Sue's buttocks, right cheek. Yeah. So she hated that dog. She said the dog bit her. I said, no, the dog was jumping at your belt. But anyway, so yeah, we 63 days later, we were blessed with this breed of dog that you would call a German Shorthair, German Wirehair, whatever you want to call it. It was with Queenie and Haskell. I didn't want to rule Queenie out from ever breeding again, even though I was getting into the Wirehairs, but I didn't want to keep one. And honestly, it was the easiest litter. I had people calling me years later to find out if I would do it again. So I kind of get it when somebody gets excited about outcrossing something totally different. It's a gamble. It's a risk. I wouldn't do it. But by accident and inexperience and ignorance to some degree, it happened to me. And I found homes. I put ads out for them. In fact, one guy called me up. He said, you got any more of these pups? My wife wants it. If you got one left, we want another one from the same litter. It goes back to, don't get 2 dogs from the same litter. That one turned out. And we actually had, back in the day, what we called a mock test. That was when people were getting ready at the chapter level to do your NA test. We would have a mock. And at that point, I think I was an apprentice judge. And Ken Whitney was a judge, and Dick DeCam. And so for the chapter, for a training day, we would do a little field search, modified. We'd do the water, just like the test, and we'd do the tracking, just like the test. And I remember, I think I had 2 of these dogs of my own that I hadn't gotten rid of yet. In fact, Roof, my best buddy, he found some people in Illinois, over in Chicago suburbs, that wanted them. One person, I think, knew me, and another person said they wanted one. Anyway, everybody loved these dogs. Every one of them had furnishings. You'd think they were a Wirehair, but you know what? They might have just been I never had a person call me back other than to say, could you do that breeding again? So where did I go from that? Well, we went all the way back from Haskell to Desi. So Desi, though. Now, Desi is my I did have those pups for a little while, and I think it took a while to get rid of the last two. But they're not going on the plaque. Right now it's Haskell, Cora, now Desi. Desi is the apple of my eye, okay? Now, not knowing much about breeding still, I don't mean still today. I've done a lot of research. I'm not saying I'm great at it, but I don't wear rose-colored glasses anymore. I thought if we took Haskell's raw talent, because my God, that dog, you know when you hear people say, that dog's never lost a bird, never lost a cripple. I'm not going to say that, but I'm going to say it was close. I mean, I used to take him out duck hunting over in Muskegon. There's a dike that runs between two swamps, and some nights I would just go there in October and do some pass shooting. I remember coming out with Haskell one time, and there was a couple guys coming out of the cattails, and I said, hey, how's it going? We're bullshitting. He goes, oh, we didn't see much. I said, no, I didn't either. I was just down the way. He said, well, we got one down out here, and he said, we can't find it. And we saw it hit, and I said, well, if you don't mind, I told him a little bit about duck search, and I was trying to test Haskell. As it turned out, he couldn't pass a UT test to save his soul. Hang on a minute. The wife is calling me. Let me do my new instant message. Says, I'll call you back. I'm doing a podcast. So Haskell went out in that, I said, dead bird. Now, Haskell had no cooperation, mind you, but he had talent. I mean, he had the genetics. He found deer. He found cripples. He could, I'm telling you, I could bring him to a spot that any other dog lost the bird in, and he had a better chance of getting it. Anyway, so I've got Desi. I'm all excited about her, and I'm thinking, well, if I get the love of Desi and that freaking talent of Haskell, guess what? We're going to breed them. Of course we're going to breed them. What novice dog owner hasn't said that at some point? Now, I know there's some people that start out in the nowadays, they start out like, nope, we're going to get breed mate, and there's so much information out there, and there's NAVDA scores, and there's AKC scores, and Federation scores, and VDD scores. It's a whole lot easier with the internet and with chapter support to do a better first job. But that wasn't my story. Remember? I took a pregnant dog named Sadie from Mike, and that didn't work out well. But this is going to be now my first wire hair litter. And we did pretty good. I mean, the dogs weren't bad. And I kept a dog named Donka. Donka will start off the next episode of this when I get into, well, I'll have to jump back. Desi is also the dog that I got my first, that's how I became a judge in NAVDA. You had to pass a utility test. You had to go through the handler's clinic. You had to apprentice all over the place, all on your own dime, all on your own time. You were under evaluation. But the one caveat was you had to pass a dog. There was no score required, or no minimum score. Just had to pass. Prize 1, prize 2, prize 3. Could have been 126, prize 3. Wouldn't have mattered. But Desi is the dog, the one I love so much, the one whose eyes were warm like butter, as they say. Desi was the dog that I first passed my utility test with. Was not a great score. And I'll tell you more about Desi, our utility test, how we got that, and then how we got Donka. And until then, yeah, I'll do that. I'll just do a midweek episode because I'm going to have a weird weekend coming up. I've got to go to Virginia. I've got a well problem. Wednesday, I got to pull the well out. The well is 600 feet deep. I don't know what I'm getting into. I got a well guy coming. It's going to be a mess. So I think what I'll do is record the rest of this and release it next week so you got something to listen to when you're coming back on your trip from wherever you're at. I hope you're having a great, great, great hunting season. And remember, you don't have to get birds to have a great hunting season, but you got to have a dog and you got to have friends. I want to thank my Patreon patrons, Pike Gear, Onyx, CZ USA, Boss Shot Shells, Waltons, Purina, Gunner Kennels, Garmin, Canine Athlete, W Hunting Supply, Decked Drawer Systems, Shooting Sportsman Magazine, and don't forget to check out the Upland Institute. For God's sakes, be a better trainer. That's where this whole story about these dogs are going to go to. I'm going to tell you the progression of being a better trainer. Well, you don't have to repeat history like I did. You don't have to make 72 mistakes. Check out the Upland Institute, and you could be a better trainer. Talk to you. Love you guys. Love you girls. And always, I love you girls more.